Hi, I'm Pranamya and you're watching Pages of the Globe. So if you're new to my channel, basically every day I read stories, I tell you a little bit about their author, and I give you an analysis about them. Before you scroll away thinking, oh my god, I do not want to hear a 10-year-old read a short story, I can promise you, A, I'm not 10 years old, and B, if you go ahead and look at the intro video pinned on my channel, you will learn that I actually can, read stories and give deep analysis about them. At least I like to think I can. But if you don't want to go ahead and watch that, it basically just tells you that, I have the credentials and I promise you I can do it. You just have to trust me. Without further ado, let's get on with the intro. Alright, so the story that I'm going to be reading to you today is There Will Come Soft Rains by Ray Bradbury. Now, before I tell you a little bit about the story, I'm going to tell you a little bit about the author, Ray Bradbury. Ray Bradbury was a highly influential American author known for his contributions to the science fiction and fantasy genres. Now, some very key facts about him is that he was born in 1920 and he passed away in 2012 in Los Angeles, California. Some notable works that you most definitely have probably read or at least heard of is, first of all, Fahrenheit 451, published in 1953. Fahrenheit 451 is a very popular dystopian novel about a future where books are banned and quote-unquote firemen burn any that are found. Another notable work is The Martian Chronicles, published in 1950, and Something Wicked This Way Comes, published in 1962. He has won many awards, and as for his influence, he has had a significant impact on literature, film, and popular culture. His imaginative and thought-provoking stories often explore themes of censorship, technology, and human nature. There have also been many adaptations of his works, including Fahrenheit 451 and The Martian Chronicles. As for his style, you'll often see he has this sort of poetic writing style and ability to blend elements of fantasy and horror and science fiction into his stories. As for his legacy, he is often considered to be one of the greatest science fiction writers of all time, and his works continue to be read and studied widely. Now, as for the short story, There Will Come Soft Rains, There Will Come Soft Rains was first published in Collier's Magazine on May 6, 1950, and later included in his collection, The Martian Chronicles, published in 1950. Here are some key points in the story. So, the setting of the story is in this futuristic automated house on August 4th, 2026, which actually isn't too far from here. And it's this sort of post-apocalyptic world that has a lot of advanced technology. And you'll see this in a lot of the stories that he has. You'll see a lot of advanced technology. Now, as for the historical context, it's important to know kind of what time or what the time period was when this book was published, because it's going to help you be able to decipher the story on your own. Well, it was written in the early Cold War period, so you'll see these contemporary fears of nuclear war and the devastating potential of atomic weapons. It happened during the aftermath of World War II. It was published during that time, and the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki heavily influenced such narratives. The title and themes of the story you may actually recognize because it is inspired by Sarah Teasdale's poem, There Will Come Soft Rains, which is an incredibly famous poem which imagines a world where nature continues unaffected by human conflicts and destruction. Basically, in the poem, it just talks about how nature would go on and it wouldn't bat an eye if all humans just suddenly vanished without a trace. Overall, There Will Come Soft Rains is a poignant reflection on the consequences of technological progress and the enduring future of power. Without further ado, let's get on with the story. Remember to like, share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like me to read next. In the living room, the voice clock sang, "Tick-tock, 7 o'clock, time to get up, 7 o'clock," as if it were afraid that nobody would. The morning house lay empty. The clock ticked on, repeating and repeating its sounds into the emptiness. 7-9, breakfast time, 7-9. In the kitchen, the breakfast stove gave a hissing sigh and ejected from its warm interior 8 pieces of perfectly brown toast, 8 eggs, sunny side up, 16 slices of bacon, 2 coffees, and 2 cool glasses of milk. "Today is August 4th, 2026, said a second voice from the kitchen ceiling. In the city of Allendale, California, it repeated the date 3 times for memory's sake. "Today is Mr. Featherstone's birthday. Today is the anniversary of Tilida's marriage. Insurance is payable, as are the water, gas, and light bills." Somewhere in the walls, relays clicked. Memory tapes glided under the electric eyes. 8-1, tick-tock, 8-1 o'clock, off to school, off to work, run, 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 8-1. When no door slammed, no carpets took the soft tread of rubber heels. It was raining outside. The weather box on the front door sang quietly, "Rain, rain, go away, umbrellas, raincoats for today." And the rain tapped on the empty house, echoing. Outside, the garage chimed and lifted its door to reveal the waiting car. After a long wait, the door swung down again. At 8:30, the eggs were shriveled and the toast was like stone. An aluminum wedge scraped them into the sink, where hot water whirled them down a metal throat, which digested and flushed them away to the distant sea. The dirty dishes were dropped into hot water and emerged twinkling dry. 9:15, sang the clock. Time to clean. Out of warrens in the wall, tiny robot mice darted. The rooms were a crawl with the small cleaning animals, all rubber and metal. They thudded against chairs, whirling their mustached runners, kneading the rug nap, sucking gently at hidden dust. Then, like mysterious invaders, they popped into their burrows. Their pink electric eyes faded. The house was clean. 10 o'clock. The sun came out from behind the rain. The house stood alone in a city of rubble and ashes. This was the one house left standing. At night, the ruined city gave off a radioactive glow which could be seen for miles. 10:15. The garden sprinklers whirled up in golden founts, filling the soft morning air with scatterings of brightness. The water pelted window panes running down the charred west side where the house had been burnt, evenly free of its white paint. The entire west face of the house was black, save for 5 places. Here, the silhouette in paint of a man mowing a lawn. Here, as in a photograph, a woman bent to pick flowers. Still further over, their images burned on wood in one titanic instant. A small boy, hands flung into the air. Higher up, the image of a thrown ball, and opposite him, a girl, hands raised to catch a ball, which never came down. The 5 spots of paint, the man, the woman, the children, the ball, remained. The rest was a thin, charcoal layer. The gentle sprinkler rain filled the garden with falling light. Until this day, how well the house had kept its peace. How carefully it had inquired, "Who goes there? What's the password?" And getting no answer from lonely foxes and whining cats. It had shut up its windows and drawn shades in an old maidenly preoccupation with self-protection which bordered on mechanical paranoia. It quivered at each sound, the house did. If a sparrow brushed a window, the shade snapped up. The bird, startled, flew off. No, not even a bird must touch the house. 12 noon. A dog whined, shivering on the front porch. The front door recognized the dog and opened. The dog, once huge and fleshy, but now gone to bone and covered in sores, moved in through the house, tracking mud. Behind it whirred angry mice, angry at having to pick up mud, angry at inconvenience. For not a leaf fragment blew under the door, but with the wall panels flipped open and the copper scrap rats flashed swiftly out, the offending dust, hair, or paper seized in miniature steel jaws was raced back to the burrows. There, down tubes which fed into the cellar, it was dropped into the sighing vent of an incinerator, which sat like evil ball in a corner. The dog ran upstairs, hysterically yelping to each door, at last realizing, as the house realized, that only silence was here. It sniffed the air and scratched the kitchen door. Behind the door, the stove was making pancakes, which filled the house with a rich baked odor, the scent of maple syrup. The dog frothed at his mouth, lying at the door, sniffing, its eyes turned to the fire. It ran wildly in circles, biting at its tail, spun in a frenzy, and died. It lay in the parlor for an hour. 2 o'clock, sang a voice. Delicately, sensing decay at last, the regiments of the mice hummed out as softly as blown gray leaves in an electric wind. 2:15, the dog was gone. In the cellar, the incinerator glowed suddenly, and a whirl of sparks leaped up the chimney. 2:35, bridge tables sprouted from the patio walls. Playing cards fluttered onto pads. In a shower of pips, martinis manifested on an oaken bench with egg salad sandwiches. Music played. But the tables were silent and the cards untouched. At 4 o'clock, the tables folded like great butterflies back through the paneled walls. 4:30, the nursery walls glowed. Animals took shape. Yellow giraffes, blue lions, pink antelopes, lilac panthers, cavorting in crystal substance. The walls were glass. They looked out upon color and fantasy. Hidden films clocked through well-oiled sprockets, and the walls lived. The nursery floor was woven to resemble a crisp cereal meadow. Over this ran aluminum roaches and iron crickets, and in the hot, still air, butterflies of delicate red tissue wavered among the sharp aroma of animal spores. There was a sound like a great matted yellow hive of bees within a dark bellows, the lazy bumble of a purring lion, and there was the patter of okapi feet and the murmur of fresh jungle rain like other hoofs falling upon the summer-starched grass. Now the walls dissolved into distances of parched grass mile on mile and warm endless sky. The animals drew away into thorn breaks and water holes. It was the children's hour. 5 o'clock, the bath filled with clear hot water. 6, 7, 8 o'clock, the dinner dishes manipulated like magic tricks, and in the study of a click, the metal stand opposite the hearth, where a fire now blazed up warmingly, a cigar popped up, half an inch of soft gray ash on it, smoking, waiting. 9 o'clock, the beds warmed their hidden circuits, for nights were cool here. 9:05, a voice spoke from the ceiling. "Miss Clean, which poem would you like this evening?" The house was silent. The voice said at last, "Since you express no preference, I shall select a poem at random." Quiet music rose back to the voice. "Sarah Teasdale, as I recall, your favorite." There will come soft rains and the smell of the ground, and swallows circling with their shimmering sound, and frogs in the pool singing at night, and wild plum trees in the tremulous white. Robins will wear their feathery fire, whistling their whims on a low fence wire, and not one will know of the war, not one will care at last when it's done. Not one would mind, neither bird nor tree, if mankind perished utterly. And spring herself, when she woke at dawn, would scarcely know that we were gone. The fire burned on the stone earth, and the cigar fell away into a mount of quiet ash on its tray. The empty chairs faced each other between the silent walls, and the music played. At 10 o'clock, the house began to die. The wind blew, a falling tree bough crashed through the kitchen window. Cleaning solvent, bottled, slattered over the stove. The room was ablaze in an instant. "Fire!" screamed a voice. The house lights flashed, water pumps shot water from the ceilings. But the solvent spread on the linoleum, licking, eating under a kitchen door, while the voices it took up in a chorus. "Fire! Fire! Fire!" The house tried to save itself. Doors sprang tightly shut, but the windows were broken by the heat, and the wind blew and sucked upon the fire. The house gave ground as the fire in 10 billion angry sparks moved with flaming ease from room to room and then up the stairs, while scurrying water rats squeaked from the walls, pistoled their water, and ran for more. And the wall sprays let down showers of mechanical rain, but too late. Somewhere, sighing, a pump shrugged to a stop. The quenching rain ceased, the reserve water supply, which had filled baths and washed dishes for many quiet days, was gone. The fire crackled up the stairs. It fed upon Picassos and Matisse in the upper halls like delicacies, baking off the oily flesh, tenderly crisping the canvases into black shavings. Now the fire lay in beds, stood in windows, changed the colors of the drapes, and then reinforcements. From attic trapdoors, blind robots' faces peered down with faucet mouths gushing green chemical. The fire backed off, as even an elephant must at the sight of a dead snake. Now there were 20 snakes whipping over the floor, killing the fire with clear, cold venom of green froth. But the fire was clever. It had sent flame outside the house, up through the attic to the pumps there. An explosion! The attic brain, which directed the pumps, was shattered into bronze shrapnel on the beams. The fire rushed back into every closet and felt the clothes hung there. The house shuddered, oak, bone on bone, its bared skeleton cringing from the heat, its wire, its nerves revealed, as if a surgeon had torn the skin off to let the red veins and capillaries quiver in the scalded air. "Help! Help! Fire! Run! Run!" Heat snapped mirrors like the first brittle winter ice, and the voices wailed, "Fire! Fire! Run! Run!" like a tragic nursery rhyme. A dozen voices, high, low, like children, dying in a forest alone. And the voices fading as the wires popped their sheathings like hot chestnuts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 voices died. In the nursery, the jungle burned. Blue lions roared, purple giraffes bounded off. The panthers ran in circles, changing color, and 10 million animals, running before the fire, vanished off toward a distant steaming river. 10 more voices died. In the last instant, under a fire avalanche, other courses, oblivious, could be heard announcing the time, cutting the lawn by remote control mower, or setting an umbrella frantically out in the slamming and opening front door, 1,000 things happening. Like a clock shop, when each clock strikes the hour insanely, before or after the other, a scene of maniac confusion, yet unity, singing, screaming, a few last cleaning mice darting bravely out to carry the horrid ashes away, and one voice, with sublime disregard for the situation, reading poetry aloud in the fiery study until all the film spools burned, until all the wires withered and the circuits cracked. The fire burst the house and let it slam flat down, puffing out skirts of spark and smoke. In the kitchen, an instant before the rain of fire and timber, the stove could be seen, making breakfast at a psychopathic rate. 10 dozen eggs, 6 loaves of toast, 20 dozen bacon strips, which eaten by the fire, started the stove working again, hysterically hissing. The crash, the attic smashing into the kitchen and parlor, the parlor into cellar, cellar into sub-cellar, deep freeze, armchair, film tapes, circuits, beds, and all like skeletons thrown in a cluttered mound deep under. Smoke and silence, a great quantity of smoke. Dawn showed faintly in the east. Among the ruins, one wall stood alone. Within the wall, a last voice said, over and over and over again, even as the sun rose to shine upon the heaped rubble and steam. Today is August 5th, 2026. Today is August 5th, 2026. Today is the end. Alright, so that was There Will Come Soft Rains by Ray Bradbury. Now, this is one of my favorite short stories, and you'll see Bradbury writes, like I said before, a lot of dystopian short stories like The Veld, All of Summer in a Day, and you'll see that a lot of these stories have this sort of like very futuristic, high-tech time and setting, and it's very interesting to just read how he does this world building, and I think it's very inspiring as a writer myself. But the time the story was kind of written, it was written in the early 1950s, so it was kind of haunted by the fear of nuclear war. And so this story is sometimes known by the slightly longer title, August 2026, There Will Come Soft Rains. And it appeared in Bradbury's 1951 collection, The Martian Chronicles. Now, just for like a quick summary, what really happens? The story is set in this house in 2026, where, assumingly, a nuclear war has annihilated all human life. However, all of these like technological devices in the house, like the mechanical clock and the dishwasher, they all continue their daily automated duties until they are too overwhelmed and destroyed by the forces of nature. So what do we see? We see the clock has announced the date, August 4th, 2026, which is actually not too far from now. So it's so crazy to me to think that when Bradbury was probably writing the story, he was like, okay, let me choose a year that's like very, very far. And then he probably landed on August 4th, 2026. But here we are, a little less than like a century later, and we're reading this story and analyzing the story yet again. Now, there are no signs of human activity or even habitation within this house, but these various contraptions are preparing everything for the day, except these humans that these machines are designed to quote-unquote serve don't show up. Like, the kitchen prepares the eggs and toast and bacon, but all the food goes untouched and is poured down the waste disposal unit. And it's just so interesting to see exactly like what's going on, how the house is continuing to move on even after the family is gone. And then at noon, the family dog returns and he's led inside and it's like shivering, it's emaciated, it's covered in sores. And it's not stated, but it's implied that this is the result of the nuclear attack which killed the dog's owners. So he's like trailing mud all over the house and all these like robotic little mice are cleaning up after him. And in like almost this like depressed sort of way, he just like lays down after realizing, yeah, none of my owners are here anymore. And then the worst part probably about the story, or like the most gut-wrenching part, is when this robotic voice reads a poem chosen at random. And today is the poem Sarah Teasdale's There Will Come Soft Rains, which is a poem about wartime, and it describes how what the world would be like if mankind perished utterly. And in summary, it just says nature would not care and the world would carry on, which is such a painful reminder of what's happening right now. All of mankind has gone, it's perished, yet this house is automating every day as it normally would. Now, at one point, wind gets caught up and causes a fire in the house. And the house responds by turning on water sprinklers to douse the fire. But this fails to put the fire out. And the house is destroyed and technology in it fails, with only just one wall surviving and the mechanical voice which opened the story surviving to announce the next morning the new date of August 5th, 2026 over and over again. Now I'm going to kind of go into a more like deeper analysis of the story. So first I kind of want to focus on the poem itself, There Will Come Soft Rains, because that was written in like during the First World War of 1914 to 1918. And the poem was written way before the story was written. And so Bradbury actually borrowed that title for his story. But he took it and he kind of put a twist onto it where technology had made war on an even vaster and more destructive scale possible. As the bombing of the Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki had shown in 1945. So this is the main theme of Bradbury's stories, nuclear annihilation. Nowhere in the story does it ever say, hey, there was like a nuclear attack or something. But we're able to kind of infer that that's what happened by the way it describes everything else in the city, how everything's like radioactive, and not a single human survived. So there are several grim ironies which Bradbury explores and reveals in this story. First of all, there's the technology. All of these robotic mice and mechanical labor-saving devices are part and parcel the technological and scientific progress which led to the development of the atomic bomb. Bradbury is inviting us to ask whether technological progress is in itself a good thing. Instead, much comes down to how it's used by humans. Second, the technological aids which fill the houses were powerless to protect the house's inhabitants from this horrific death in the nuclear blast. These robotic mice may continue to clean and the clock persist in announcing the date and time, but this is just a reminder of this emptiness which otherwise fills the house, which was designed for human habitation. It makes all these technologies almost pathetic because this other type of scientific breakthrough, nuclear fission, can make it possible for humans to wipe each other from the face of the earth. Having this mechanized voice read you a poem every evening is a very small consolation for the prospect of a nuclear winter. And I think most poetically of all, there's the dark irony which Bradbury took from Teasdale's poem, There Will Come Soft Rains. Even the most powerful man-made device of all of them, the atom bomb, is dwarfed by the hardy persistence of nature. All it took was a gust of wind to start a fire, and these two natural phenomena succeeded in wiping out all of the remaining technology with the almost grimly comical voice of the mechanical clock announcing the new day. It is worth remembering that the United States of the 1950s was, for many, a time of great optimism. America had helped the Allies to win the war in 1945, and particularly for middle-class America, this was an era of great hope and prosperity. But it was also a time when the Cold War between the US and the USSR was starting to worry the authorities. In the 1950s was the decade of Senator McCarthy's anti-communist witch hunts, and Americans were only too aware that their victory in the recent World War had largely been made possible by unleashing a dangerous new weapon upon their enemies. What would have happened if the Soviet Union developed and then launched atomic bombs on America? I remember I was reading this book during the time, and children would practice bomb threats and what to do if a bomb was dropped or something. But the thing was that, if a nuclear atomic bomb is dropped, hiding under your desk, unfortunately, is not going to help. And I remember the kid in this book says it. He's like, this isn't going to do anything. And the teacher was like, you're right, but just for peace of mind, we practice these drills every week. And I think that was such a powerful line in the book. Even though it was a very small part, it still just showed how helpless humanity is against something that they created themselves. Now, in this era, which our houses are filled with voice-activated technology, security cameras, electric dishwashers, broadband, and the rest of it, and living, lest we forget, in an age dangerously close to the year which Bradbury's story is set, 2026, Bradbury's vision of a home dominated by such technology has kind of come true. It almost kind of feels like these houses are now a machine for living in. But in Bradbury's story, the machine has been stripped of all of its life. All of this technology is mimicking human activity in some way, right? We have this clock that's mimicking human speech, and the mice, which are mimicking human cleaners, and it almost kind of reminded me of in Cinderella, all the little mice, or in some sort of ballet scene where there's a bunch of tiny mice that are doing something or the other. And I think in the story specifically, Bradbury uses a number of similes and metaphors which describe the house as a human body. He describes the house as having a paranoia, which is old maidenly in its nature, and he refers to the nerves, veins, and capillaries of the house as if it were a sort of living organism or a living thing. The irony shouldn't be lost on us. The simile is there to point up the ironic distance between the technological house and the recently destroyed humans for whom it was built. However, what unites the house with its former occupants is that both will ultimately be destroyed by forces greater than themselves. Now, honestly, there are just so many different metaphors that Bradbury talks about that I could go into, but it would take like another 30 minutes. So I kind of wanted to talk about my own interpretation of this story, and I wonder if you guys have a similar one. But when I was reading the story, it very much reminded me of when a family member or a friend or just a loved one passes away and life goes on, right? It doesn't stop. Friends may come and say, hey, I'm sorry, like, yeah, I feel bad for you. But the next day they go to work. You know, the taxi drivers will still continue to drive their cars. No one will stop and say, okay, let's all, collectively stop and remember this person. That's just not going to happen because life, unfortunately, goes on. And I think what the story very much reminded me of was how when that happens, it's just this gut-wrenching feeling. Because at the end of the day, yes, maybe your mother has died, but you still have to go and pick up the mail from the mailbox. Yes, maybe your best friend just killed herself, but you still have to go to school every single day and take your tests and take your quizzes and get your GPA. And I think that is such a mind-boggling experience, and this specific story very much reminded me of that mind-boggling experience. I remember when we heard news that my cousin, who lives all the way in India, passed away. It was a very, very horrific experience. And we hadn't even entered the house yet. I remember so clearly my mom and I were banging on the doors of our house because my sister was upstairs and she was sleeping and we had forgotten the key. So we needed her to open the door, but she couldn't hear the doorbell. And I remember we got the phone call right then and there. And so obviously we're sitting on the little bench that we have in front of our house and we're just like, oh my God, what happened? And I see my neighbor come out, and it was this was peak COVID time. I see my neighbor come out, and he's wearing a mask that has a smile on it because, I don't know if you know, but that was a thing during COVID for some reason. He had this mask on that was smiling, and he asked me, and he was like, oh, what's going on? And I was like, I just found out my cousin died in a car crash. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And obviously this is such a gut-wrenching moment. And the worst part about it is that he's wearing a mask that has a literal smile on it. And he can't help it, obviously. He didn't know that an hour prior to this, my cousin would have passed away. So he just picked up the first mask he saw and he put it on. And he probably thought to himself as he looked in the mirror, wow, this is such a funny, cute mask. And I remember he was telling me, oh, I'm so sorry. And all I could focus on was this disgusting mask he was wearing. And the reason it was disgusting was because it was an actual face. It was the actual bottom half of the face. And it just didn't match up with his face at all. And it looked so strange. And I almost wanted to burst out laughing because I was like, what is going on? This is so weird. But after that, he got in his car and he drove off to work or the grocery store or wherever he was going. And that just made me stop for a second and think how the world truly does not stop for anyone. And that is what this story painfully reminded me of, was that this technology was going, this technology was making the food, it was reading out poems. Meanwhile, the owners of the house had all perished. And I think that was such a gut-wrenching, moment, realization. And I think that's what I love about Bradbury's stories, is that they always make you feel some type of way once you stop reading them. And you'll continue to think about them for the rest of the day until you can sit down and just, kind of throw up all your words in your head. And I think that's what I'm doing with this recording. So I'm going to go ahead and stop here. But please let me know what your experience was listening to this story. And yeah, that's about it for today. Remember to share, subscribe, and comment down below which short story you would like me to read next.